war. War never changes. Some of you might have heard these words in the intro and the introduction to the video game Fallout 4. Fallout 4 is a video game where you wander around the ruins of post-nuclear apocalypse Boston. And while this game does take the whole idea of nuclear Armageddon to a bit of an extreme, because it's a video game, it's not really meant to portray real life. It still is a good example of the consequences that can come along with nuclear warfare, of all nuclear warfare. So with that picture in your head, was it really the best course of action for the United States to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I say that it was. It was the best option available to the United States besides, a full-on invasion of Japan. It brought the war to a very, very quick end and decisive ending. And it's war. When you're in war, you're going to use the best weapons, the best technology that you can in order to come out on top and come out victorious, defeat your enemies. It really and truly was the best option for the United States. Prior to dropping the atomic bombs, we've been conducting something called the island hopping campaign, going from the Army and the Navy were going from island to island, recapturing them from the Japanese. And as we were doing this, we learned that the Japanese weren't going to surrender. They would fight literally to the last man. They would suicide bomb our tanks and our men. They would just run full on at them with sticks when their weapons, when they ran out of ammo. We started encountering the kamikazes, pilots in planes who would just fly their planes straight into our ships. They would just not surrender. So when we drafted up the invasion plans, knowing that surrender is not an option to the Japanese, the figure that our leaders and military leaders came up with is that it was going to cost America 800,000 lives. And it's going to cost 10 million Japanese lives before we were able to fully recapture Japan. And it was going to take us about another whole year to do it, if not longer. And compare those figures, almost 11 million people in total, to both atomic bombs combined killed about 220,000 people, and that's including the people who died later on from radiation sickness and other radiation poisoning from the bombs and everything. So, I mean, the 11 million people versus 220,000, that's not really, it's really simple math. You're going to pick the option that costs less lives. And after we dropped these bombs, it ended the war almost immediately after we dropped the second one. If we had done the invasion, the war probably would have lasted another year of this already terrible conflict. It was a big show of force, because Russia, after we dropped the first bomb, Russia actually ended up declaring war on Japan, and so us dropping the second one and ending the war right then and there, it prevented Russia from having any say in occupying Japan or any of its territories, because the United States was the one who did all the fighting to take Japan out of the war. And a lot of you are going to be arguing, saying it wasn't a moral decision. It was too devastating of a weapon to use. Well, we were already, as soon as our bombers were in range of the Japanese homeland, we were firebombing their cities. And at the time, a lot of Japanese cities were primarily made of wood. So we would firebomb them, and it would just level sections of cities over the course of, a couple runs, and dropping hundreds of bombs. So the atomic bomb just really did what we were already doing, quicker and more efficient. We were And it's war is war. If you don't use the technology that's available to you and the weapons that are available to you, you aren't going to win. It's the side who has the best technology and the means to produce it and use it, they're going to win the war. So you use those weapons. So we use the nuclear bombs, and then as soon as we were, we declared peace. We went over and we helped rebuild. We helped rebuild our entire country. We based our constitution off of ours. We occupied Japan for, I believe, a good 30 years. Maybe longer. I think it's like 30 or 40 years we occupied Japan, just helping them, rebuild their infrastructure, rebuild their economy, and so now they are what they are to the country that they are today, producing all the big electronics. A lot of the big video game manufacturers are out of Japan. A lot of, yeah. And the other argument against it is that it kind of jump-started the Cold War between the US and the USSR. But it was already going to happen anyway. We were already Russia had already gobbled up most of Western Europe, and our policy against containing communism was already in effect. And we were already kind of in those two blocks of capitalism versus communism, United States versus USSR, NATO versus the Warsaw Pact mindset, even before we dropped these, even before the war was over. So dropping the atomic bombs didn't really make any difference in that aspect, and also terrible acts were committed by both sides. You have to remember the Japanese weren't that great. I hate to say it, but they weren't that good of people at the time, especially when it came to prisoners of war. I mean, if you ever have read or have heard of the book or movie Bridge Over the River Kwai, what the Japanese made the British and other prisoners of war do, and what the Japanese did in Nanking, and how badly they treated our prisoners, you wouldn't have much sympathy for them at the time, especially if you're American. And after what they did at Pearl Harbor and everything else, dropping these bombs was really, I hate to say it, but it was really an act of almost an act of revenge and retribution against what the Japanese had done to the United States and to the world really at the time. So we were really in. So dropping the atomic bombs was the right decision. Bottom line, it really was. Dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it saved millions of lives. It set a precedent for how America would deal with their enemies in the future. And while it did cause a lot of destruction to happen, we were already destroying their cities through firebombings and everything. And it really is, we were at war, willing to do whatever it took to come out on top. It's just really easy for us us in today's day and age to sit and judge people in the past based on their decisions that they made. But I mean, if you were in their situation, I bet you would probably have made the same decision that they did. I bet you would have still dropped those bombs and saved all those lives, even with all the consequences that became of it. Yeah, that's it. And I'm going to stop recording.